Awesome. Okay. Well, thanks so much for having me. I'm Beth Gillis. I am the Executive Director of Lake Champlain Lake George Regional Planning Board. So before I was Executive Director, I was actually in charge of the water quality for.
We can hear you now. Mute.
You can't hear me?
No, we can hear you fine. I think Dave was just joining in.
Oh, okay.
You're great. Carry on.
All right. So before I became Executive Director, I ran the water quality program here, and this is actually the last big thing I did in 2018 before taking over as ED, was to publish our Subwatershed plan. So in Lake Champlain, just some fun facts. I don't know if anybody knows much about it. Sometimes we are referred to as the sixth Great Lake, which I'm not sure how people in, there we go, Western New York feel about that, but it's 120 miles long. It flows north. Really, it has a huge watershed. So the watershed area is 21 to 1. So there's a lot of land, New York, Vermont, and Canada, that drains into the lake.
Hey, Beth, I am going to interrupt you. We're seeing the your presenter mode. I don't know if you can flip it. If you can, I don't know what your display, you can go up to display settings and drop down and maybe mirror it. You're just in the, yeah, like swap that maybe.
Yep.
Ah, perfect. Thanks.
That work? Okay.
Yes.
So in 2002, a joint TMDL for phosphorus, so joint between New York and Vermont, TMDL for phosphorus was created. And as part of that, the watershed was broken up into lake segments. And so these are the New York segments. So can you guys see my cursor if I do this? Am I pointing at things? Okay, so here's Isle Lamont up at the top. That's Great Chazy River. Here's Cumberland Head. This is Saranac Lake, Lake Placid over here. Saranac River comes in. Main Lake is this big guy right here. It's Au Sable and Boquet River. This is Port Henry Maria. Otter Creek is like this little tiny sliver right here. Most of it's in Vermont. This is what we call South Lake A. It's the Lake George watershed. And then South Lake B is Meadowy River, Pulteney River in Washington County. So as part of the TMDL, we were provided with phosphorus reduction allocations. We did this plan. So this plan was 2013 to 2018. So we were using the 2010 numbers. About that same time, the EPA actually came in and made Vermont redo their part of the TMDL because they weren't reaching their phosphorus reduction numbers. We still weren't, but they were doing way worse than New York. So New York didn't have to redo it, but there will be a new joint one, I think in 2026, it's going to kick off. But so these numbers are kind of old, but point being, we really weren't, except for in South Lake A, reaching our phosphorus reduction numbers. And really the only reason that South Lake A is because it is Lake George. So all the other segments are riverines. And Lake George is the only big lake. So any phosphorus coming off of that watershed is going into Lake George. It's staying in Lake George. It's not spilling out into Lake Champlain. And so the monitoring in Lake Champlain showed that there wasn't really any loading. But as part of all of this, and Vermont kind of redoing their thing, we thought we needed a little bit more of a comprehensive and coordinated approach to figuring out where we do projects, why we do projects, how we do projects. So we started this plan, and it was funded through Department of State, LWRP. I will say back then, the program was a little different, and so we were able to use that funding. I think they're coming back around more to the watershed stuff. But we had two goals. So we wanted to identify areas in the watershed that have the highest potential for phosphorus inputs and the negative impacts they're having, and then identify on the ground projects to reduce phosphorus. So we did it in Huck 12. So there's 79 Huck 12s within the New York side of the Lake Champlain watershed. And I won't go totally into the model that we created, but we worked with the DEC out of Albany to pull kind of all these parameters and as a way to identify high priority segments. So basically a high priority Huck 12 has a lot of surface waters that are listed on the PWL with pollutants associated with phosphorus. There's noticeable impairments. They're within the lake segment that has the greatest phosphorus reduction needs. steep slopes, impermeable soils, public drinking water. We did have a parameter in there for public beaches, but it turned out they all had public beaches, so it was not a defining factor for anything. There are a high quantity of septic systems near water bodies we used within 100 feet. A lot of streams, a lot of roads, a lot of actively eroding road banks, and then a high percentage of developed impervious or row crop agricultural lands. So our limiting factors really was the availability of GIS data. Finding contiguous information across the 5-county area was actually harder than I thought it was going to be. But I think we came out with a pretty good model for when we did it. So we ended up normalizing the HUC 12 so that size wasn't a factor. We decided to use the Jenks method, so natural breaks instead of equal interval. That there was a nice kind of grouping at the top 19. We ended up with top 19 high priority subwatersheds. And so the highest possible score was a 95 and the lowest was a 15. And I just pulled these from the model just to show some of the how some of the things came out. So this is parameter 2. So this is impairments. Red areas indicate there's a higher severity of impacts. Lower, so you have the developed area along the lake here. Obviously Lake George, Washington County. Here's the Adirondack High Peaks. You can see over on this one slope, high peaks, super high. This is a very agricultural. This is the Champlain Valley, very flat, very fertile, and a lot of ag down here in Washington County as well. Miles of tributaries. Again, lots of water up here in the high peaks. There's a huge amount of water and wetlands in Washington County down here and in the southern basin of Lake George. Roads, again, roads being a pollutant indicator or pollutant input. Obviously, the developed areas along the lakes are where the greatest road mileage is. And then this one's the current land use, phosphorus loading per land use type. So developed forested ag. Obviously, here's a lot of ag here. Developed along the lake, a lot of ag here. And then this is the high peaks and the higher areas around the Lake George watershed. So this is what we came up with. We put it through the model and we ended up, as I said, there was this nice break at 19. So the red and the orange areas are where we concentrated looking for projects and identifying projects to do phosphorus reduction implementation with. So to get the projects, honestly, so I was running this project. I met with almost every highway department, town supervisor, soil and water, lake association, anybody who had anything to do with water quality in any way, I sat down and talked to them. So we ended up identifying 263 projects totaling 187 million in funding needs. And we broke them up between these 4 categories. So whether they were stormwater, ag-related, erosion, or wastewater. Some of them, especially like stormwater and erosion or stormwater and ag, it can be both. So we just kind of grouped it in the one that it was most associated with, but some do cross over. And then we also thought it was important to identify regional priorities because we wanted to really facilitate more. Oh, sorry, no, this isn't the regional priorities. This is our priority. So within each priority subwatershed, we identified priority projects. And we did this, we had a steering committee for this plan. It was made up of people from a bunch of different arrays, town supervisors, nonprofits, environmental groups, soil and water. And so we held a meeting. I think it ended up being like a 4-hour meeting. I had a poster board with all of the projects for every subwatershed. Everyone was given stickers and they had to go around and put the sticker on what they thought the highest priority project was. And I was really surprised that for most of them, everyone was pretty in sync and in line. There were a couple where we had to compromise a little bit or have a little bit more of a discussion about. So we just wanted to pull priority projects because we ended up with such a large list. It was kind of like, where do you start, right? So we took that extra step to identify priority ones, but it didn't mean that we went necessarily for grants on those first. But it was nice to say within a grant application, this is a priority project. And so this is what it looks like in the plan. There's a little ditty about the Subwatershed. There's why it ended up being a priority. There's some narrative on the priority projects. There's a map. And then for projects that have like a finite lat long, we put them on there as well so you can see where the projects were located. And then these are, so each one has a project list and a project number associated with it. And we gave the lat longs, you know, what the jurisdiction is, how much we think the project would cost, where we think we could get the funding from, who would be the lead on it, but then also any other partnering entities, and then whether it was short, medium, or long term for implementation timeframe. Now, I guess I took the regional projects out. We did come up with regional projects, but it was more like, you know, fund our rural road active management program every year. It was just kind of talking points that we could go to the DEC with if we wanted, you know, to try to get something, you know, a line item put in for something. So I just want to talk about a couple of the projects that we ended up doing. So in high priority subwatershed number 1, so this was actually Lake Champlain direct. This is in the city of Plattsburgh. This is the U.S. Oval, so it's part of the shuttered Air Force Base that the city inherited when the Air Force Base closed in 1995 and everybody left. So here's the Oval. This right here is 4.5 acres of parking lot, and there's 30 acres of rec fields. Right here is Lake Champlain. This right here is the city gym, what was turned into the city gym. And the door to the city gym is the lowest point of the entire oval. And so every time it rained, water went into the door of the gym. And so we worked with the city to put in a vegetative swale and a bioretention basin in the area to capture the water. So here's the gym, as I mentioned. This is where we ended up putting the bioretention basin. The swale is right here, and this is, you know, part of the parking lot that you saw before. So here's the swale, here's the parking lot. So all this comes into here, and then this little guy goes across the street. You can actually see where they paved here, coming into the bioretention basin. Here's the bioretention basin, and then it has an overflow that goes into other stormwater infrastructure on the backside that goes out into the lake. And so that has stopped all flooding, all of the gross stuff coming off of the parking lots and the road are going into that now instead of going either into the gym or directly into Lake Champlain. We also did some signage as part of it around the basin, and there's like a little walking path too, so you can walk around the basin. In Lake George, we ended up with a ton of projects, but project 832 right here, which is actually right there outside my window. There's a lot of urban runoff. It's kind of a hill down into the lake, so it's going right into Lake George. So we got a basin program grant to put a hydrodynamic separator at the end of the street, and then also do a trench drain with a catch basin and a bioretention basin at the beach. So this is just from the grant application. This part right here is like the main road. This is my building right here. I'm sitting right here. So parking lot. And then these are restaurants. So all this runoff went straight into the lake here. You can actually see where there's some sediment buildup. So we put a hydrodynamic separator right there. And then the rain coming off of our building and then onto this parking lot comes down this pathway and actually went straight over the sidewalk and was eroding the bank down here by these trees. So at the bottom of the sidewalk, we put in a trench drain with a catch basin and then a bioretention basin down here into the lake. So this is them putting the hydrodynamic separator in. This is a trench drain. So here's that pathway I was talking about. So it goes into here. Here's your catch basin. This is them installing the catch basin. And then it goes across this sidewalk and there's a tiered bioretention basin. And then here's the lake, and this is actually the village beach. And so this is all vegetated now. People hang out on it. It looks cool, but it's capturing the water. They have to clean this out all the time, which I guess is a good thing. It means it's doing its job and it's capturing everything it should. This was another fun project. This was the town of Whitehall DPW. The DPW superintendent previous to the one I worked with on this project, Louis, um, had all been kind of like bushed up and grown up in here. And I guess the previous superintendent just used to throw stuff over it. That was kind of like his little landfill. He just kind of shoved it over and chucked it over the brush. So when Louis took over, he took down all the brush, he cleaned up everything. This is Mud Creek, but they were still mowing down to it. And it is a trout stream technically, and pretty close to the Lake Champlain, or the Champlain Canal, which then goes right into Lake Champlain. So we worked with them. You can see kind of the runoff coming from the DPW site down here. So we ended up doing a 20-foot by 100-foot depressed area with a berm sides. We hydro-seeded it, planted along the stream bank, and then put some catch basins in as overflows. So this is the DPW site. So this is the project area kind of down here. And then you can see where the stormwater is kind of cutting through and coming down into here. This is the salt shed right here. So we did this. And so here's the catch basins that obviously if it fills up too high, it goes into the catch basins and out into Mud Creek. They put willow wattles along the stream bank. So this is all grown up now. It kind of looks like that. The stream is nice and shaded. They do mow this just to keep it kind of maintained, but it was a really fun project to do with the DPW, and the highway super was super into it, and he's a riot. So we had a good time on that one. One of the other things that we do actually quite often is grouping projects into WQIP applications. So anyone on here that's familiar with the WQIP applications, you can do a program. And so you apply for a program that's multiple projects within one application. So we've done them countywide, we've done them watershed wide. So we've had projects in 5 counties in one application. Couple of reasons that works well. You can use parameters from each one of your project areas to kind of like answer a question. So you can leverage certain projects to help get funding that might be more difficult to get because they don't quite hit the parameters. But now you don't have 5 counties who are right next to each other submitting the same application for the same types of projects against each other. You're just submitting one big one. So we've been doing this for about 15 years now. We pull the projects right out of the plan that we have. So we've gotten a couple $1 million to do that. And then, so we have a whole erosion book. Soil and Water went around and took pictures. And so now we have all the pictures and we have all the information. So it's really easy to do a grant application for it. And then also, I just kind of wanted to emphasize, don't be afraid when you're doing a watershed plan to say that you need to do more planning. So the Great Chazy River was the only major river system in the watershed that didn't have its own watershed plan. So we put in the plan that we needed to do one. We got $50,000 for it. Right as we were kicking that off was the same time that DEC was starting the HABs action plans. And the Isle Lamont Lake segment, which Great Chazy River is in, was getting a HABs action plan. And so the DEC asked us if we would extend the scope and not just do Great Chazy, but do the whole lake segment. And so, it was kind of like apples to apples with the HABs action plan. And we said, yeah, of course. So we did. So it ended up being the Isle Lamont Lake segment plan. But that's just the watershed. So really, we only added on a little bit up here and kind of this down here. The rest of this is the Chazy. But I just pulled some maps out, the potential pollution sites, invasive species locations. It was, we had the project lists like we do in the Champlain plan. And then we just got a grant to do this. So Wood Creek Lake Champlain Canal Subwatershed ended up being the 4th highest priority. And we had we only had like a handful of projects identified in this. We had a really unwilling supervisor who just wasn't into anything we were doing. So in the last couple of years, there's a new supervisor who I actually happen to know because he used to work with my husband. And he's like, oh, big fan of you guys and the work that you do. So we just got funding to do a Wood Creek Lake Champlain Subwatershed assessment because we really need to get in there and figure out what projects we should do. But clearly it's an important watershed because it ended up number 4. So again, don't be afraid to do more planning. These are just pictures of bad things that happened. Pictures of good things that happened. So since 2018, 63 of the projects have been done. We don't do all of them, and that's the other thing too, is all of the plans that we do, we make sure that they're written for everybody. We don't have to own everything. There's no possible way for us to do everything. But if it helps someone else, a town, a county, a not-for-profit, if it helps them get funding in to do water quality improvement projects, we're all about it too. So we're actually now working. So we did a bit of an update to the plan in 2024, but we're going to start next year really working with the DEC when the TMDL comes back online to really kind of get back in really in depth into redoing the project list. So the plan's on our website. We also have a pollution reduction calculator. We use the DEC's pollution reduction calculator to get sediment, nitrogen, and phosphorus reduction calculations. So that's on our website as well. And I think, yeah, that's it.